Welcome to Multifamily Talks, a RealPage podcast where we talk about all things that are important to you, the things that are important to the multifamily industry. You're going to hear a variety of voices in this series, and it's one of the things I love about being here at RealPage is, we've got great software solutions. We're known for our data and our analytics and our market reporting, and certainly those are of value, but we've also got 6,000 voices here, and that's the global workforce at RealPage, with a lot of us with a lot of ideas and a lot of value to be delivered to the industry, which is why we're all here. And I got to laugh a little bit because this one is going to be so much different than every other podcast we probably do. Welcome to Las Vegas, gentlemen. We're here at Real World 2023 at the Wynn Hotel, but if you're going to get these guys in the room together, I'm going to take the advantage to at least start a conversation. So, gentlemen, welcome to Vegas.
Thanks, Andrew. Hopefully all those flats were fair coming in, no issues.
So far, so good.
We made it.
It was a good one.
I haven't lost any money yet, so.
Well, you haven't tried hard enough, Arben, clearly. So I guess let's start with this. Arben, you're very prepared. I'm impressed that you have notes on the table with you on this. We all agree
has nothing to do with
we weren't going to do that exactly. So Carl, actually, I want to start with you. Let the cat out of the bag a little bit to get ready for this first release. You and I both recorded a few with different guests, etc. Tell the audience a little bit about what you were hoping to deliver through your voice, what surprised you so far, and where you want to go with it.
Yeah, I like that, the little trifecta of questions. So as Andrew mentioned, I've had the benefit of pre-recording a few. We've had, 2 guests in the hopper thus far. And for the first guest, I didn't necessarily have a super clear direction necessarily, just kind of let the conversation flow organically. But about halfway through the conversation, it struck me that I think the voice that needs to be brought, at least from my perspective, overseeing our team of market researchers and market analysts, is I want to hear how others in the industry, whether internal or external, are looking at the market research space. There's the developer hat, there's the investor hat, there's the capital markets hat. There's so many different hats and lenses really that the space can be looked through in a very market research focus. So it may not necessarily always be the most exciting of conversations. It's going to be a little bit more data-driven, a little bit more economic trends and market trends, just how the space is evolving. But the biggest surprise thus far has been how willing our guests are to be candid about even their personal life outside of work. It's been a very open, free-flowing conversation, and I really like that because I think one of the challenges in doing a professionally based podcast is that you can run the risk of being a little bit too businessy, for lack of a better term. Yeah. It can be a little bit dry, it can be jargon-filled, but these have just been like pulling up a seat with somebody at a happy hour and just having a conversation with them for 20, 30, 40 minutes.
Well, and it's funny, you say that it might be a little dry on the market research. Between the two of you gentlemen, you guys get stopped more than any other people I know when we go to conferences and we go there. So I think people want to hear that. So
you've got 3 data nerds here, so you're going to get a lot of data nerdy stuff.
Well, there's a wannabe data nerd over on this side as well. I just don't have the credentials.
You're more well-rounded.
No, I just got stuck on the operations side of the business. Jay, everybody loves you, so I'm going to come to you last. Arben, talk to us a little bit, because you've already started to build out an audience on LinkedIn. You've got your, I know I'm going to butcher the name, it's not the Economic Minute. What is it on LinkedIn, the series?
RealPage Economy Express.
See, there we go, the RealPage Economy Express.
Very close.
How are you thinking about bringing that to kind of a more long-form conversation and the guests kind of you expect to kind of bring on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned before, the U.S. economy is huge. It's 27 followed by 12 zeros. So $27 trillion. And every day something happens. Every day you have a report out there. And those kind of things, at least the 3 of us, fascinate us. And so we want to make it as easier for our clients as possible to understand what do those numbers mean. If unemployment goes up or down, is it better for the multifamily industry? Is it worse? If inflation goes up, is it good or is it bad? So these are some of the things that we're trying to convey through these conversations. And I think so far we've been doing a pretty good job.
Okay, so answer that question for me. If inflation goes up, is it good or bad?
I'll let Jay answer that.
One thing I will say with watching Arben's Economy Express thus far, it's really nice because it's almost like you get this professorial approach to these data points, and it's just a bite-sized piece, and it's like, hey, this is nice for somebody that doesn't necessarily have an advanced level economics degree. They can still understand this and see why it matters. That's hard to do.
Yeah, it's not a 1-hour lecture. It's very bite-sized. friendly.
And I was going to add that, they say if you put two economists in one room and you ask a question, you will not get same answers. So you made the mistake of inviting three of them. So God knows what answers you're going to get.
Well, like I said, this is long form conversation, so I need the longer answers.
We could all agree that the
back and
answer
forth.
is it depends.
I literally in presentations say I'm going to give you my favorite and least favorite answer at the same time. It depends on a whole bunch of stuff that goes on there. Well, yeah. So one of the things that I also hope that you guys get into a little bit, and we're able to bring somehow through these conversations, is I get the benefit of sitting with the three of you in different areas. Arben, you sit across from me, essentially just a little bit back. Carl, you're 2 desks back, and occasionally we actually do end up in the office. You guys are so good at delivering market research and market presentations on a webcast format and written format. But to me, the fun part is listening to how you get there, like that aspect. Is there a kind of thought on bringing some of that conversation to the table?
Yeah, I could chime in, just having the benefit of recorded a few of these podcasts. It's interesting to hear others' approach to how they enter those answers, or even the types of questions that they're getting from their, I would say, client base, if you will. But whether it be investors that they're talking to, or if they're talking to some of their folks out in the field, just how do they approach these questions? So that's been something that we have been tapping into thus far, but I think it's still a little bit early to see where that ultimately heads.
Well, you bring up a good point. It's actually one of the things that I think is interesting about the long form conversation of a podcast. Is you can come into it with one particular idea, and where it ends up over time, who knows? There's already a couple. Like I've done 3 so far, and the kind of what I'm really trying to explore with the guests is I want to give a forum to tell our partner story in the industry. Employee development has become a common theme in it, and I think there's some challenges that the industry needs to face. As we talk about things like centralization. Somebody set the timer. How long do we go without saying centralization? Whether it's centralization or stabilization or specialization, the old employee development model in multifamily housing from the operations side relied on the community manager being exposed to everything at that community so they can learn a little bit about it and get that developed into a regional manager. I think people are starting to realize centralization and specialization is starting to break that model, and we don't have any model to put on top of it. So it's been kind of interesting to hear that voice that comes through. Jay, we brought you into this obviously because we want the clicks on LinkedIn and we want to get more engagement from that.
Be disappointed.
True story. We recently you posted something on LinkedIn that made me start thinking about something else, and I posted it with your name attached to it. That post now has 7x engagement relative to what my normal posts do. So again, for those of you looking about search engine maximization, just figure out a way to tap into Jay Parsons. But seriously, obviously incredibly valuable voice in the industry, incredibly valuable voice within RealPage. What are you hoping to do? I mean, you've got the webcast and everything else. What are you hoping to do with this platform?
Well, that's a good question. So I'll tell you I love this stuff, right? And so it's fun to talk about these things, in particular because multifamily all of a sudden is at the center of everything. You think about this last 10, 15 years, multifamily has rapidly transformed from an alternative asset class to now a very mainstream asset class. 15 years ago, office, now it's almost hard to even believe, like office sales were 2 times as much as apartment sales. That was the golden child in commercial real estate. Now it's completely flipped. And not just because of COVID. Before that, and COVID accelerated that. Apartment sales are more than 2x office sales, even prior to this recent slowdown. So that's happening on the investment side. More and more investors are pouring into the space of all types. But then also, we talked about inflation, man. We're joking about this. It's like now rents are in the spotlight because it plays a huge role in CPI. And what we're seeing in inflation, the consumer price index, is having a massive impact on not only everyday consumers, but also on fiscal policy being closely watched. And a lot of people don't realize that we see that the shelter numbers, that's a third of the weighting of CPI. Shelter is rent.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize this. It's like, while most of it is more homeowners than renters, the homeowner index is based on a survey of renters with some various manipulations to it. So it's all about rent. And so rent is in the middle of everything right now. And I think that makes it just a really, great topic to dive into.
Absolutely. And you've done a really good job of educating the broader industry towards this. I want to give you kudos for that, seriously, because the idea of what CPI, up until the last 4 years, let's say, I would pay attention to CPI as a number, but not really the breakdown to it. And then the voice that's come through of understanding the impact that rent specifically has in that, and the fact that it's basically a trailing 12-month number on that. You've done a good job of bringing that voice. So,
and to be honest, not just you, it's like I never spent much time with it because no one cared. It was always 3%, 4%.
Right.
Like it was a very steady number. In fact, just to nerd out for a second, the CPI in its current form was really born out of the last inflationary period in the late 1970s, early 1980s. Back then, home prices were actually part of the CPI. Well, we had this rapid increase in home prices, led to some wild fluctuation in CPI, and someone said, hey, we should dump home prices out, replace it with rents. And that worked for, almost 40 years. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the model turned out to not be so great, and there are some real flaws with it. But we're now at a point where we're still, the overall inflation numbers looks high. You take out shelter, we're below pre-pandemic norms on CPI. Most people don't even know that.
It is crazy. No, I didn't know that. And it also, as you're saying that, I was like, wait, we manipulated a broad-based index to take out a data point so it'll tell us something we want it to tell us. Yeah. I'm shocked that never happens in these things.
Wind me up, I'll keep going. So stop. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to wind you up in a different direction. One of the things that I've always enjoyed that we've done for the last, 4 years now, 3 years, is what we call the 23 Voices campaign. Yeah. It's one of my favorites because we get to kind of turn to the industry and basically ask, what's important to you? Like what are you focused on? And one of the things I've found through this process, and granted, it's been a short period that we've started recording things, but we're able to ask that question now throughout, and see what it's building at. And we talked at another time, we were, one of the things that obviously is huge right now is expense control, and what is a controllable expense versus an uncontrollable expense. And you shared an anecdote at one point, I think around utility expenses, as to whether people thought it was a controllable or not. Share that story real quick.
Yeah, so the idea of controllable and non-controllable expenses, you have things like taxes and insurance. Unfortunately, none of us have any control over that, despite our wishes that we did.
Especially insurance right now.
Until we get you elected.
Yeah, that may be a ways away.
So there's a possibility, is what you're saying.
No, and there's a chance. Unless it's to city council, then maybe we could talk.
You and I can talk later. My wife ran for that. You don't want that.
A little hometown of 3,000 people, maybe that's the platform. But you have the controllable side, and then you have the non-controllable side, which we've just talked about, and then the controllable side, which are things like operations, maintenance, payroll, et cetera. You have some levers that you can work and tweak and pull there. But utilities is in this weird, 50% of it's non-controllable, 50% of it's controllable. And I actually polled some internal folks here that have really deep operations background, and their answers were split almost 50-50.
Yeah.
And and the reasoning and the logic offered by both the folks that said it's controllable and non-controllable, both was based in sound logic. Somebody said, well, you can negotiate your prices. I'm like, yeah, that's true to an extent. Somebody said, well, you can install smart thermostats and have ways to meter these things. And yeah, that's true. That's controllable in that sense.
Yep.
So there was even different interpretations of the word controllable that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've asked that question, or I brought it up, so I've asked that question to a couple of the guests, and everyone first and foremost laughs at the question because they realize that no one has a clear definition as to whether it's a controllable or uncontrollable expense. But it's another element of what I'm hoping to bring to the overall conversation from the operations side is, let's start not necessarily standardizing terms, but really starting speaking your same languages. One of the things that we've had a challenge on a couple different things, like the word conversion. If you ask the word conversion to a marketer versus an operator versus a revenue manager versus an asset manager, they're all different things. But it's this, and all of them are correct. So can we move towards that more subsidized element, the more in there? So
yeah, conversion's a fun one too, because then the next question that we often get, we're getting this question a lot more too. I don't know if y'all have been hearing this from groups that y'all have talked to, but a conversion, Well, you have the lead that leads to a conversion, but is there a qualified lead? Is it a lead that's being, is that one lead shopping 5 different assets today versus 2 years ago, they were just shopping the one asset that had any availability? It's really interesting to see how those things can even change in a matter of, 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is, Jay, to your point, it's an industry that's rapidly evolving in ways that we resisted for a very, very long time. And as you were talking about that earlier, one of the things that came to mind was, that this industry at the beginning of, and again, I always kind of come at this from an operational background. Yes, I can talk asset management, I've done it, but the operators where my head is usually at. It was the first time that this industry that someone can come in without a college degree and end up working their way to a 6-figure income. In fact, just about every person I've talked to that has led an organization started as either, usually a leasing professional or on the maintenance side. It's an amazing, amazing part of the industry. But it was the first time they were validated, the fact that you're essential.
Yeah.
They were on site taking care of residents during that time frame. So it's fun to kind of reveal that heart of the industry.
Yeah, also too, the thing I love about our industry is that this is an industry no one sets out and they grow up and go to college and say, I want to be in multifamily.
Yeah, unless their dad is already doing it or their mom. Or
those are rare circumstances, right? But it's like none of us, I think, on this stage and most of the 1,500 people here at Real World, I'd love to see a poll. How many of you growing up that I want to be in multifamily? I guess it's very few, but once you get in there, it's a special place to be.
Agreed. Good.
And I was going to add that 20 years ago, American dream was to get a good job and buy a home. Now it's, I want to get a job, not necessarily buy. I want to rent. It's easier. If I get another job, I can move. So that's why I think the multifamily industry is much more important now than it was even 10 years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're going to solve the housing crisis in America, we need more homes. And the fastest way to do that, quite candidly, is to build multifamily, not single family on large plots of land. So,
yeah, we need more of everything, but density gets us scaling much faster.
I would start to ask you about NIMBYism, but I think that you've got a hard stop here coming up in here in a little bit, because I know I would go off for a while on
it's
that
a
one.
problem.
It is, for sure. Well,
no, it depends on that one.
So anyways, thank you guys for coming in, taking a little bit of time. Thank you for watching this episode number 1. We hope that you'll go through the rest of the episodes as all of us bring different guests in different time frames to really, again, bring your voice to the forefront. And for that, we thank you guys. Have a great day.